So my first meeting with Srila Prabhupada was in March of 1971. And I have to give a little bit of the history so we can understand the circumstances. I had a friend, John, who's now Yadubara Das, and he and I were in college together, majoring in photography. I was an undergraduate and he was a graduate student. So he decided to do his master's thesis on the Hare Krishna people. And he went to India sometime in the winter of 1970. And after he had been there a few months, he wrote to me and said I should come and join him. So I did that, and that's how I arrived in Bombay in March of 1971. Now in college I had done a term project on close-up photography. And I'd taken that term project to a publisher in New York, and it gradually evolved into a small book about close-up photography, a kind of a specialty book. So when I went to India, I brought that with me. So about a day after I had arrived in Bombay, John said we should go and meet the Swami. Now, at that time, the devotees had a temple in a building called Akash Ganga, which was right by the ocean. And the temple was on the 7th floor. So it was a very, when we went into Prabhupada's room on the 7th floor of Akash Ganga, immediately it was a very kind of a spacious, airy feeling because the windows were open, the sea breeze was blowing through, a lot of natural light, very nice. And the room was very simple. Prabhupada sat on a white, small cushion behind a table, as he traditionally did. Very relaxed. So I was there with John, and John introduced me and explained who I was a little bit. And then he took the book, my book, which I had under my arm, and said to Prabhupada, "Here, she has done this." So Prabhupada very graciously and gentlemanly-like took the book, and he looked through it for a minute, thumbing through the pages, and then he handed it back and said, "We do not know much about these things." I actually was considering when I brought the book that here's a saintly person, why should I show a saintly person a book about close-up photography? It didn't seem appropriate. So by saying that, Prabhupada confirmed my idea that it wasn't really appropriate, but it was, I had the impression of a very peaceful, I wouldn't say transcendental, I wasn't thinking that way at all, but pleasant person to be around. Well, my initiation took place November 29th, 1971. And at the time, Prabhupada had taken a group of devotees to Vrindavan, India, and he had, before the initiation, he had personally given us a tour of the different holy places, which was truly wonderful. He took us to Brasana. At that point, he rode on the palanquin. The devotees carried on a palanquin around Brasana. And he took us to Govardhan Hill, and he bathed with us in the Jamuna. It was an extraordinary time. So this time of our initiation, it was early in the morning on the 29th of November, quite a cold time in Vrindavan. And there was another couple who wanted to get married at the same ceremony. Yadabar and I were going to be married, and I was going to be initiated. And this other couple, the husband-to-be approached Prabhupada saying that he also wanted to marry this woman. The unfortunate part about it was that he had already been married to a devotee, and he had left that woman. And this second proposed wife was already pregnant. So it was rather a dishonorable, more than rather, it was a dishonorable circumstance. But at the same time, so from that point of view, Prabhupada couldn't say yes. But from another point of view, he couldn't say no because the first wife was already gone, the second proposed wife was already pregnant. So how could he say no? It became an enigma. And he resolved it in the most brilliant way. I forever am impressed the way he resolved this problem. Gurudas was doing the ceremony, the actual fire sacrifice. So he instructed Gurudas to do the entire ceremony for this other couple first. From the mantras and the achman and the bananas in the fire, everything was done, the cloth was tied together. And at that point, Gurudas started a second, separate fire sacrifice for my initiation and our wedding. And at that point, Prabhupada came out of his room and sat on the Vyasasana. So without saying anything, he made a very clear statement. it was, what can you say, it was a genius, just a genius solution to a very uncomfortable situation. So the ceremony went on, and at the end, Prabhupada asked me the 4 rules and regulations for the initiation part of it. So I managed, I had rehearsed that, so I managed to explain what they were. And then he said, how many rounds every day? So I said 16, feeling very confident of myself. And he looked at me right in the eyes, and although we had looked at each other before this was the first time it was at such close distance. And that was since that was the first of several times after that this happened, it was a most memorable experience. Prabhupada's eyes were dark, and they seemed bottomless, truly bottomless. And at the same time, I felt for the first time in my life, and only with him, that he saw way past the obvious, way past the body, and even past the mind. He could actually perceive my consciousness, which, it's a little discomforting because my consciousness was far from what it should be, unfortunately. So you could say it was a penetrating look, but ordinarily, when you use the word penetrating, it connotes maybe critical or judgmental, but it was none of those things. It was a very kind, gentle look. And at that time, since it was the first time, I was quite surprised by how perceptive I felt he was. And in the future, when he used to look at me, my reaction would be that, first of all, that I was not where I should be in terms of my Krishna consciousness. But rather than being discouraged, I wanted to increase, to try to please him by my Krishna consciousness from his very perceptive look. So when I said 16, and he gave me that look, right, eye to eye at such close distance, and then he said, that is the minimum. 16 is the minimum. So now I just do the minimum. At least I do the minimum. But anyway. And then it was time for him to give me my name. I was the only initiate, so he hadn't bothered to think of a name. It was rather insignificant. So he asked Shamsundar, do we have a Visakha? After a moment of thinking. So Shamsundar went to another room. Apparently they had some record of all the initiates. And he looked it up, and he came back and told Prabhupada, there is a Visakha, but she's left. So Prabhupada turned to me and said, your name is Visakha. And after the initial meeting, John and I had this idea. We were very young and idealistic. So we had an idea that we would do a photo essay about a quaint Indian village and make a cultural presentation that people could appreciate traditional life in India. So we thought this was a wonderful idea. We were beside ourselves with our own brilliance. But the problem was, of course, in India there are thousands upon thousands of villages. And we had no idea which one would be the most suitable for a story like that, a photo essay. So John said, well, Srila Prabhupada's from India, and he's traveled extensively. We should ask him where to go. So we went that morning back to Akashganga, and again into Srila Prabhupada's room, and John presented to him our idea. So Prabhupada looked at us. I'm sure we were flushed with the fervence and of our idea and the enthusiasm that comes with such a young age. And he said, wherever you go, they will simply cheat you and steal your cameras. So from our body language, we must have been crestfallen. We didn't say anything. And there was quite a pregnant pause. And he looked at us. And then he said, best that you go to Vrindavan and do your photo essay in Vrindavan. So some months later we did that, not right away, but maybe 4 or 5 months later. We actually did that. And probably the most remarkable thing about that pastime with Srila Prabhupada is that Srila Prabhupada had only seen me twice, and he knew nothing about me. And unfortunately, I came from an atheistic background. My parents were atheists, and until I went to the temple in New York, about a year or so before I met Srila Prabhupada. I had never been in any church or temple or any sort of religion, not even to see the stained glass. That's how bad it was. So, so he, by his instruction to go to Vrindavan, now looking back on that decades later, there was nothing more appropriate he could have said to me, because that month that we spent in Vrindavan was truly transformational for me. I would wander the streets, and everywhere you go, of course, there are temples, and even beyond the temples was the piety and the spirituality of the residents of Vrindavan. Everyone's saying Jai Radhe and has devotion foremost in their lives. So that, what can you say, that instruction of Prabhupada could not have been more appropriate. So now Calcutta Temple in those times had many problems. Among them, for instance, the temple was not very clean. It kind of reflected the city of Calcutta. And the prasadam was substandard. And perhaps because of these problems and being out of their own culture, the Western devotees fought amongst themselves quite regularly. The way the temple was designed in those days, to go from the office to the prasadam area, which was on the porch, you had to actually walk through the temple room. So I have memories of the GBC and the temple president walking through the temple room arguing with each other about something. This was just an idea of the atmosphere in the temple. There was also tension between the men and the women. There was even one sannyasi who enjoyed leading, but he was very particular about how the various instruments were played. And if he didn't like the way an instrument was being played, he would walk up to the devotee playing it and say, "Give me that thing," and take it away from the person. So I was thinking during this time, I don't need this in my life. I have other things to do. I should really, just go on with life, get a life, as they say. But the thing that kept me was the mantra, not the Maha Mantra, but the mantra was, Prabhupada is coming. Prabhupada is coming. You can't leave now. He'll be here very soon. So I was hanging on by a very thin thread. And Prabhupada did come in October. And that was extraordinary. He immediately saw the situation, and he had an istagosti. So everyone in the temple came to his room. When I go into that room now, it's the office of the temple president, but I still remember where I sat and where Prabhupada sat. And he gave the most wonderful talk. It was the first time, although I'd heard Prabhupada lecture, I'd never been to an istagosti, and I'd never been so affected by someone's talk as I was by this. It was never taped, and I didn't take notes. But basically he was talking about tolerance and patience and transcending problems. And at one point I remember specifically he gave the example of his own life. That when he came to New York, he was staying with someone who kept meat in their refrigerator. And the way he said the word meat with such disgust, I realized for the first time how austere that must have been for him. It's a person of such caliber. So when I left at the end of that, I actually felt lighter walking out of that room on that occasion. It was a transformation in my consciousness. As I said, the conditions were not good, so John and I were not feeling comfortable living in the temple there. So at one point we were together in Prabhupada's room, and John said to Prabhupada, referring to the conditions, perhaps we should live outside and just come to the temple, and in that way we could avoid the problems. So Prabhupada said, yes, you can do that, there is no problem. But even though there's so many problems, still it is better here. So in Calcutta especially that's true, but I think almost that could be said in any temple, in any city. The devotees again traveled to Jaipur, and we were hosted at the various Gaudiya Maths in Jaipur. And one particular time, it was the noon arti. The Pujari was doing the arti, and Prabhupada was standing fairly close to the altar, and the devotees were somewhat back having a kirtan. So I was photographing Prabhupada at that time, and I noticed that he was looking around trying to catch someone's attention. The devotees were absorbed in the kirtan, so they didn't notice him, so he just caught my eye. So he called me over like this, and I went, since the kirtan was loud, I had to put my ear right next to his mouth to hear him. So he said, do you have any rupees? So I put my mouth next to his ear and I said, no, but I can get some. How much? So again he said, he thought for a second, he said 10. So I went around and I found some devotee who was a little on the side, not so much participating, and I said, Prabhupada wants 10 rupees. So immediately he gave me the 10 rupees. And the bill was flat at that point. And I went up and I handed it to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada carefully folded it in half and folded it again. And he kept it with his folded palms. He kept the rupee note in his palms like this as the arti went on. And then at the end, the pujari blew the conch shell, signaling the end of the arti. And Prabhupada took that 10 rupee note and put it in the donation box. So then I remembered, after that I had read, that when you come before Radha Krishna, you should make some offering. And Prabhupada was observing that etiquette at that point. I was photographing Srila Prabhupada here in Los Angeles while he was sitting on the Vyasasan. And Rameshwar had asked me to take pictures of Srila Prabhupada with his eyes open, because they were for the various Chaitanya Charitamritas and Bhagavatams, and he felt it was more suitable. So at this point, I wouldn't take pictures during the lecture because the flash and the shutter disturbed Prabhupada, so I would take them during the Radhamadhava prayers. And this particular day, Prabhupada had his eyes tightly shut for a long, long time. So I was just sitting, waiting for him to open his eyes. And it went on, for many, many mantras. And then, quite unexpectedly, I felt this thump on my backside. And I looked around, and a sannyasi had hit me with his danda, indicating that I had been there long enough and I should move on. That was the spot for all the sannyasis. And there I was, right at his feet. So I looked at Prabhupada, and at that moment he had his eyes open, and he had seen what had transpired. And he looked at the sannyasi with the most harsh, stern look, like a very displeased father. And I was grateful that that look had not been cast upon me, because it was withering. And then he looked at me, and I took my pictures, and then I did leave. And I was more amazed, besides that pastime, what amazed me even more than that was, although the temple room was packed, people had come from all over the West Coast for this occasion, no one said anything to me. No one remarked, hey, I saw that, blah, blah. It was mystical that had happened in a room full of devotees, hundreds of devotees, and no one had seen it. It was between the three of us. Again, in Bombay in the early days, in the early 70s, Prabhupada would go just before dawn, really, when it was still quite dark. He would go down the steps of the house where he was living and walk to the Juhu beach for his morning walk. So every day I would go with him, and I would meet him when he came down the stairs. So one morning I was sitting on a landing, just chanting. And I didn't hear, it was dark, I couldn't see very well, and I didn't hear Prabhupada coming. He came very softly. And as he passed right in front of me, I could have touched him with my arm. He said, oh, thank you very much. And all I was doing was chanting japa. He was so appreciative and encouraging of a small effort. So this is, again, a morning walk in Bombay. And a woman life member was taking a small group of us so Prabhupada could walk in a pleasant area. And after the walk, we all piled back in the car, and it happens very often in India, practically every time. Some beggars came to the car, a woman carrying a small child, and she had other children with her, very much in need of assistance. And she was begging from Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada took some paisa and put it in the hands of all these different children and the woman. And, I had read Bhagavad Gita and Charity and the Mode of Ignorance and all that. So I thought, I had the audacity to ask Srila Prabhupada, why are we giving money to beggars? And Srila Prabhupada didn't say anything. And so I immediately felt that I had been, made some offensive remark. So I answered my own question, there was just silence, and I said, is it because this is transcendental? And he said, yes. So from that I could understand, coming from his hand, from the hand of the pure devotee, it may be a different category coming from someone else's hand. But it was a wonderfully instructive moment as well. At some point, Prabhupada would spend many hours looking for suitable land for our temple in Juhu. And he was living at the home of a life member, Kartikeya Mahadevya, a very wonderful person with his family. And he gave Srila Prabhupada all facility. And in the evenings, Prabhupada would lecture in his home. And occasionally guests would come, besides the regular devotees, guests would come. And on one occasion, this guest was a sadhu of sorts. At least he presented himself as a sadhu. And Prabhupada observed him, and I also noticed Prabhupada was observing this person. And the person was looking at Prabhupada's female disciples. It became noticeable. After it wasn't that obvious, but if you just looked at him for a little while, you could see. So in the course of his lecture, Prabhupada recited the verse by King Kulashekar that after I've been engaged in chanting these names of Krishna, when I think of sex life, my face turns and I spit on the thought. He said that in Sanskrit. And he asked the sadhu, what is the meaning of this? And the sadhu, he said some other meaning. He didn't say, he was thinking of another shloka. He didn't give the translation for that shloka. And Prabhupada said, no. And he gave the proper translation. And to me, again, this was Prabhupada's gentlemanly way of making a clear point and helping this person.
Hare Krishna. So Mataji shared very amazing pastimes with Srila Prabhupada.
I think Kulakishar Bhu's internet is down.
Hare Krishna. My voice is coming?
Yeah, now clear.
Hare Krishna. So just speak and introduce Mataji. We'll just start. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Pancha Kalpataru Veksha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gauravakuranda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Prabhupada ki jai. Happy days for Shabbat. Hare Krishna devotees. So I will just share a beautiful presentation made by the devotees on Mataji. Yes. So you all can see the screen, I think. So Her Grace Visakha Mataji, senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, as Mataji mentioned, she was initiated in 1971. She came in contact with Srila Prabhupada in 1970, and in November 1971, she got initiated from Srila Prabhupada. And as Mataji was introducing herself, she was doing photojournalism, means she was undergraduate at that time when she came in contact with Srila Prabhupada in photojournalism. And all of her skills were utilized very nicely in this ISKCON movement, because I will just refer to this, because most of Srila Prabhupada's photos, what we see in the centers.ISKCON Desire Tree, the center photos of different centers all over the world of ISKCON centers, those all photos have been clicked by Mataji. And of course, Mataji was mentioning that her husband Yadubara Prabhuji. He is also a wonderful photographer and filmmaker. So all of you might have seen the Hare Krishna movie, right? So Mataji helped in making that movie. Yadubara Prabhuji produced that movie. So Mataji is a very wonderful devotee and committed to teaching and speaking, and she has very practical insights about how we should apply devotional service in our practical lives. So as I mentioned, Mataji had been doing this photography, clicking Srila Prabhupada's photos and other photos as well, visiting different holy places, and they are also doing photography. So therefore, it was a very important contribution in this time, because whatever we photos have, we got of Srila Prabhupada that are so memorable for the devotees. So Mataji has also worked in ISKCON Press, writing and photographing for BTG, and publishing in the service of the Lord. Means various kinds of photos, how devotees used to do their services, how they used to contribute, all the memorable moments Mataji have captured. So you can see Mataji has written many books. I will just show you. Like these all books are there. I could not find every book, but some of the books I can show you. Yes. Yes, you can see this is published on ISKCON News, 5 years and 11 months. This is photography of Vrindavan. Wonderful captures of the scene and the story behind that. So if we get a chance, we can also visit through that. You can see this photo, wonderful photo that was clicked by Mataji. Srila Prabhupada sitting in Radha Damodar temple. So such memorable moments have been captured. You can see these sample photos are there from Mataji's book. And apart from that, others also, like this is a wonderful illustration on Bhagavad Gita, a photographic essay. So in that, what Mataji has done actually, Mataji has captured the theme of Bhagavad Gita in very nice photographs. You can see there, this is mentioned. It's a rope or a snake. It's an illusion, right? So such kind of photos and many other things Mataji has captured in her this book. So very wonderful this book also. And also for the education of women and protection of women and the duties of women, as Mataji is very experienced in that part. So Mataji has also written, what's a woman to do? This is for Vaishnavis in our movement. So Mataji has written, worked on so many literatures published. Yes. So therefore, many contributions of Mataji regarding publishing and writing, and she also speaks about different topics on Bhagavad Gita. Like you can see, she travels in US, Canada, delivering spiritually enriching programs. A bumpy journey toward harmony with Bhagavad Gita. Interesting topic. And like she is a photographer, so she has many nice photos also to show. So she makes a very interesting and impressive presentations about that. And apart from that, Mataji is also a Gurukul mentor involved in Mayapur's Gurukul community, teaching them various values. And her current services include like topics relevant to BTG, what we read in that, Krishna consciousness, modern life, and this book I already mentioned, and public presentation of ISKCON, and leading the ISKCON and providing inspiration to women and youth community. So Mataji has also helped her husband to produce that movie, Hare Krishna movie. So these are some of the very wonderful contributions of Mataji. Thank you very much, devotees. So we pray for the mercy of all these devotees to inspire us to contribute similarly in Srila Prabhupada's movement. Hare Krishna. Jai Hare Krishna Visakha Mataji ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Hare
Maharaj.
Krishna. I want to add one.
Yes.
I on lecture of Visakha Mataji. The famous picture, the most famous picture, who was throwing flowers. The most famous picture that is captured by. So I was telling that there is a program. So Shanyashi Brahmachari is there and Mataji is not allowed to enter there. And she was very upset. And she was very unhappy. Why only male can go, I cannot go. And it is her remembrance. She said that though I was unable to go there, but in that program, the picture I shoot, that is the most famous picture in this world now. So whatever Krishna does is good for everything. Thank you very much for nice presentation.
One more.
Mataji, GBC, there are only two GBCs. Malati Mataji and Visakha Mataji. And once GBC pass rule, the Mataji can give class. I think in Mayapur, first female Bhagavatam class by Visakha Mataji, I was attending that class. Like maybe 97 or 98 like that. All the she was sitting in front and Mataji was giving class. But Mataji resigned last year. Malati Mataji also resigned from GBC. Now no more female GBCs. Okay, thank you very much for attending this class. Tomorrow, whose presentation? Oh, Krishna Kirtan Pulanas tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, all devotees. Jai His Holiness Bhakti Prema Swami Maharaj ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Go.